You're free to begin the meeting.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Leak, and I'm the chair of the City County Planning Board. I now call to order the September 10th, 2020 meeting, which will be conducted remotely. Due to the state of emergency, all planning board members are also participating remotely. I will now ask our planning director, Aaron King, to call the roll.
George Bryan.
Here.
Melinda Dunnigan.
Here.
Jason Grubbs.
Here.
Tommy Hicks.
Here.
Clarence Lamb.
Here.
Chris Leak.
Here.
Brenda Smith.
Here.
Jack Steelman.
Here.
Thank you. When there is a vote, a roll call will be conducted. Each board member will be recognized and asked to clearly state their vote for the record. All guests participating in this remote meeting, either through Zoom or by phone, will remain muted until recognized by the board for comment. Today's meeting is being broadcasted live on TV 13 and is also being live streamed on the city's website. The meeting will also be replayed on TV 13 tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and Sunday at 4 p.m. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For our public hearings today, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There is no rebuttal period. Once you have been recognized by the board, staff will unmute your microphone so that you can provide your comments. After the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless the planning board asks them a question. The items under section B of our agenda will require final action by the elected body, either the city council or county commissioners. As such, votes taken today are recommendations which are considered by the city council or board of commissioners during this review of the request. For special use district zoning requests, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. If you are addressing the board today, we would ask that before you begin your comments, please give us your name, address, and zip code for the record. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the August 13th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? Is there a motion?
Move approval. Clarence.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second, Tom Hicks.
Second by Mr. Hicks. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan.
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan.
Yes.
Jason Grubbs.
Yes.
Tommy Hicks.
Yes.
Clarence Lamb.
Yes.
Chris Leak.
Yes.
Brenda Smith.
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
All right, that's 8-0.
Thank you. That's unanimous. Now I'm going to recognize Desmond Corley for our consent agenda today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to share my screen tonight. Amy's not with us because we should have a fairly light agenda. So let me know if you all are able to see my presentation at this point.
Yes.
Looks good. Good.
All right. First item on the consent agenda is B1, which is case W3454. It is a procedural matter. It is to change the zoning jurisdiction from Forsyth County to Winston-Salem. This is 150.6 acres on the south side of Mizpah Church Road across from Ridge Bluff Drive. These 150.6 acres were recently annexed into the Winston-Salem corporate city limits. And so we have a certain amount of time to change the zoning jurisdiction from Forsyth County to Winston-Salem. That's what this request is. And I guess I'll remind the board at this time that we'll need 2 motions, one for consistency and one for the actual recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question?
Yes.
Mr. Corley, there's a cutout in this that comes down from Mizpah Church Road. What is that cutout?
Are you speaking about this
Yes.
portion of property? These are properties that weren't included in the annexation or the final development plan that you'll see later. So those properties, I believe, are still in Forsyth County's jurisdiction.
So they're owned by other owners?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further questions for staff? Mr. King, do we have anyone here to speak on this matter?
We do not.
All right, then I'm going to close the public hearing.
Mr.
What is it?
Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
It's moved by Mr. Lamb,
Second, Jason Grubbs.
second by Mr. Grubb. Mr. King, will you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Tommy Hicks,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
Okay, that's 8-0.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3454.
That's moved by Mr. Lamb. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Stillman. Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Tommy Hicks,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
Okay, it's 8-0.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the consent agenda is B2, which is a final development plan for zoning docket F1309. This is 25.69 acres, essentially in the same location. This is, however, a smaller portion of the 150 acres that you just recommended for approval into Winston-Salem zoning jurisdiction. And I will show you the site plan here. The site plan is actually two types of development. This is a development. So since Mr. George asked about this notch here, the final development plan has proposed development on this side of the notch for single family development and on this side of the notch for multifamily development. So the first site plan you see is only showing you the single family development. And then the second one I'll show you will be the multifamily development. So on the single family side, there is a proposal for 30 single family detached lots. They show their common recreation area, centrally located. They have their required 40-foot type 3 perimeter buffer yard. All of this is in accordance with the requirements of the UDO. And then on the multifamily side, you can see here, they have 10 buildings. There are a total of 60 multifamily units. They've submitted their proposed elevations here in the bottom right of the screen. I've highlighted two conditions that are outside of our standard. One, and this is the second condition that you see on your screen, is just to prevent the site from utilizing commercial type signage because it has mixed use zoning, which allows commercial type signage. And we wanted to protect the character of the area by not by restricting the type of signage that could occur here and not allowing signage on Martha Avenue's connection, which you can see on the site plan. The first one also has to do with the connection to Martha Avenue, which is required by the UDO. It requires a public access easement to connect Martha Avenue along Willow Forest Circle, which is their private internal drive, to Mizpah Church Road, which is the primary access. When we brought this up during our interdepartmental meeting, there were some questions or some concerns about maintenance of that access easement, were it to be a requirement. What I would say to the board is if you would like to amend the conditions so that it leaves some room for the petitioner to pursue other avenues such as dedicating a public street, getting some sort of approval from the assistant city manager for parking along a public street, or pursuing some sort of maintenance agreement for that access easement, that we put that into this condition language and amend the motion accordingly. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the board at this time.
Are there any questions for staff, Mr. Corley or staff?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Corley.
Yes.
In the
report, you gave us a second drawing that showed, I think, the proposal for the larger build out of the entire site.
So you're talking about the second site plan that was included in your book?
Yes, yes.
That is actually the approved site plan for the totality of zoning docket F1309. It includes Long Creek Village South, which is south of the proposed Beltway, and Long
Right.
Creek Village North, which is this 150 acres. It does not include any further proposed development on the 150 acres that was just annexed.
Right. Yeah. And my question really has to do with the road system that is going to be in this built out when it's fully phased in.
Okay.
Because the question is, why is there no connection between the larger multifamily piece and the western portion of the 150 acres? And the reason I'm asking the question is because it seems like if we had another connection to the west, there would be less burden going on these neighborhood streets to the east.
I believe there is a stream that would have to be crossed to put in a road that connects the multifamily portion to the east to the rest of the development to the west. I would defer to the developer or to the engineer who is on the call with any particulars about that.
Okay, just wanted to know if it's a topographical issue or just some other reason.
I believe there are natural constraints, excuse me, natural constraints to having more of an internal network between the east and west on this northern portion.
And Melinda, this is Aaron. I would probably just add on to what Desmond said. I do think as you look at sort of the location map, you can see the stream network that exists on this 150 acres. And you can kind of see it coming along the southern edge of the image that's there, the site plan that's there in front of you that kind of that basically kind of creates this pod of multifamily. My suspicion is that piece to the south that's kind of bound by two creeks would likely get its access from Vestal Road, which is a public street that stubs into that section. And as you look at the western portion of the site, there are a lot of streams basically that traverse that section as well. So definitely some topographic and some stream issues on this site.
Okay, so even on that portion, there's a stream then that we're not able to see.
Yes, it's a little clearer on the area plan map.
That's the one I was looking at as well, Desmond. It's a little easier to see it on the area plan map with that yellow background.
I do see it now. Yeah. Okay.
And Desmond, I'm Matthew Kirshner with Eagle Engineering. If you guys want, I can answer some of those questions as well. If you can, Desmond, do you have the overall site plan on your presentation anywhere that I can speak to?
I don't have the overall site plan in the presentation, but I'd be happy to highlight any areas that you want to speak about specifically.
I guess overall, on this is the only apartments that we're going to propose in the entire.
Sorry, sir, excuse me. If you could state, since you're speaking, if you could please state your name and address, zip code for the record.
Yes, I'm Matthew Kirshner with Eagle Engineering. Address is 2013 Van Buren Avenue, Indian North Carolina 28079.
Thank
I
you.
am with the engineering group on the project.
All right. So Ms. Dunnigan, did you have a question for?
I think the gentleman was going to continue to explain the issue.
Okay.
Didn't he have more to answer?
Exactly. So like you guys were saying, we have a topographic issue on that one. There is a stream that borders the bottom part of this. You can see just on the topo there, we've got about 30 feet from the stream up to the actual parking area. It kind of like limits our access into this area. We do have two other stream crossings that you'll see on the overall master plan when we bring that in. coming from the 30 single family that were one slide up, and then the rest of the single family up below it. So this kind of separates out the apartments all by themselves. And so you can see just to that road will continue down the south and cross a stream on that side. And then one more to the west to the east that will cross the stream and connect back to a public street.
Could I ask a question? Mr. Corley, do you have photos of the area?
I do. I would need to stop the presentation and pull them up. I have them on my computer, but they're not a part of my presentation.
Okay, because what I was trying to see was the access from Martha, which in my memory from visiting that, this is was a formerly residentially created street. The development there created that street, and then it was taken over by the city. Is that correct?
The Martha Avenue as a street was taken over by the city at some point.
There was a development that is just to the east of this that Vestal and Martha are part of, the two streets that are stubbed and are part of this development in the future and at this stage. Were they originally development streets put in by the development there and then taken over at some point by the city?
George, I don't know if those properties have been annexed.
Those are in the county, I believe.
So they would be state DOT maintained streets. And I don't think we have any pictures from within there. So we just have two signs up on Mizpah Church, and that's where the pictures are from.
Hang on, guys. I maybe can help with George's question a little bit here. Desmond, if you can stop sharing, I'll share my screen here for a second and can maybe shed some light on this. Okay, can you guys see that image there? The lighting pattern in the streets?
Yep.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, so you can see Vestal, and then Martha is not labeled. It's the one in the middle here. Green indicates city maintenance, and I believe red is state maintenance. So this area is in the city limits, and according to our GIS viewer, that is a city maintained road. Martha appears to be.
Thanks, Aaron.
And when I visited it, I saw no guttering, no curbing, cars parked on it, and things like that. Is part of this plan a plan to upgrade this residential street?
We've not made that. We've not made that comment as a part of the review. I don't believe it came out in any of the departmental reviews that they would be required to improve any portions of Martha Avenue other than the portion that's on their property.
We do have some off-site road work that we're doing along the main road, but I don't think any on that side road was called out on the TIA that was approved by the city.
Yeah, and yeah. Well, in discussion, I guess we can talk about more about this, but what's the city policy, Mr. Corley, about signage on those roads back there when we're doing one of these zoning cases?
Signage, what do you mean?
Well, how are the residents that are not coming off of Mizpah but going over further up, who would miss the signs, know that their road was going to be connected to a large development? I know you sent letters out, right? But the letters didn't say anything or what kind of development or whatever.
This is not a rezoning action.
Yeah.
This is a final development plan, so it doesn't require notices.
They got letters within the 500 feet.
They received letters, I believe, for the rezoning, the conversion, but no letters were sent for the final development plan. And we talked about, George, putting a sign back there on Martha.
Yeah.
But because actually technically final development plans are not public hearings and we don't send out letters, so we did not do that. I did get a call from the last property owner on the right that's familiar with this property, and he talked about a lot of drainage through there. And I told him that there was going to be a connection there, and it was kind of comparable to what was approved in, I think, 2000, whatever that was, 1 or 2. And but we did not put signs back there because, as Chris said, it's not technically a rezoning.
Right. But we do send out letters, and we did put out signs other places.
For the conversion.
Yeah. Oh, just for the conversion.
That's correct. That is a rezoning. So we're
Okay.
required the 500-foot notice
Okay.
and the signs. On the rezoning signs that we put up on Mizpah Church, we also put the final development plan case number for this.
Okay.
And would be glad to talk to anybody should they have called.
Yeah.
I also did receive a call from the, I don't know if it was the president, but one of the representatives of Long Creek to the south across the future interstate. They had some questions as well.
Thank you.
George, to your question, Brian researched it, and Martha Avenue was platted in 1956 as a subdivision, so it's been there a while.
Yeah. So the city must have at some point, maybe with the annexation, taken it over or something. Because there are street lights on it, things like that.
More than likely, what happened and what generally happens with annexation is if the road was originally maintained by NCDOT, when the city annexes it, then we accept maintenance. And my guess is that's probably what happened, given that probably what happened when this was annexed.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any further questions for staff? All right, thank you. I'm not going to open the public.
I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Brown.
I was looking at the online portion of this, Mr. Corley, and there's a section where it explains containers. What does that do to? Bulk containers?
Bulk containers is a reference to dumpsters. So
that's only for the dumpster placement.
Correct.
In that piece.
Yes.
And another question that was brought up by staff review was to provide cross-access easement on the Willis Circle to Martha Avenue. Was that shown in what we saw?
Well, that was the comment that I was making about a special condition. I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen again so you can see the language.
Yeah, help me to understand what you said there.
Yeah, so this first condition was basically a rephrasing of what you're reading from, I think you're looking at the interdepartmental comments. And that would essentially create some sort of public access from Martha Avenue, which is a public street, through this development to Mizpah Church Road. They're required to provide a secondary access for emergency services. And the connection, since there was a stub street on Martha Avenue, it was required to connect via the Unified Development Ordinances as well. They were not showing a public access easement, and that's what I was saying when I first kind of presented the staff report for this case. The condition said that they have to have an access easement. There are actually other options. They had some concerns about the proposed access easement, and so if the board is inclined to approve or take action on this tonight, that condition would need to be reworded. I mean, the board could leave the condition as is, but the petitioner would probably want to have some further discussion. We'd want to have further discussion with our internal organization to figure out whether this is feasible. They have other options. So if the board is inclined to act on this today, that condition language might need to be changed to provide some flexibility for the public access between Martha Avenue and Mizpah Church Road.
I'm not sure I fully understand that, but what I do understand or did understand for your thing that the people from Martha could go to Mizpah through this route as well, even though it wouldn't be convenient.
Correct.
Okay, and okay, I'll wait to discussion for other things, yeah.
Any further questions for staff? All right, if not, I'm going to declare the public hearing open. Mr. King, do we have anyone here to speak on this matter?
We do not.
All right, then I'm going to close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
I move, this is Clarence. Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning board approve the final development plan of F1309.
That's a motion by Mr. Lamb. Is there a second?
Second by Mr. Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Mr. King, will you please call the roll?
Could I have discussion, please?
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
You know, I don't know how many of you went over and took a look at Martha Avenue or Street or whatever, but this is clearly a residential street, but clearly stubbed. So they knew, I guess, for ages that something was going to be further down the road. I guess their developer back in '56 told them that. But it is a bit of a surprise to them. When I went down there, I ran into some neighbors and said, "Is this the road that's going to development?" And they didn't know exactly what was going on, and they furthermore didn't know that that was going to be opened as part of this development. So I wish that that there had been more understanding about that. I think the dilemma is that this multifamily development, which means more traffic, can scoot over through the neighborhood and catch Mizpah at two other places by going through Martha if they want to. And it's going to be quite a different life for the people in that neighborhood there. So when I was listening to Ms. Dunnigan's comments, it obviously would be better to me that second access to this would somehow be back to Mizpah through the rest of the development. And I wish that they could have done that. Part of it is I don't understand that block of land that I guess is owned by somebody else and why a road couldn't get through that or something along the way like that. But I did want to make it clear to the board as we were voting on this that we are dumping a lot on this little neighborhood back there. Of course, they're also getting a bypass run so much traffic through these neighborhoods, or else promise the neighbors that they'll upgrade the street, because it's not a pretty sight with all the cars parked there and yards running right into the street and things like that. Additional traffic would go this way. So I don't know, Aaron, whether there are options like that in the future with that, or whether Fansler could talk to it or not.
There's a lot of issues kind of packed up in that. One is sort of the stream crossing issue that we run into a lot, and that's a super expensive task for developers to take on. And when you've got a site like this with multiple streams running through multiple sections of it, my guess is the stream crossing that was proposed on the previous section of this was probably the one that provides the most connectivity to the rest of the site. My guess is that's why multiple connections or multiple stream crossings are not proposed. And that's a larger discussion for us as a city as a whole, because we have missed out as a city on many connections across creeks that are valuable for connectivity, but they are genuinely unfeasible for one developer to stomach. So, you know, at some point, does the city consider, you know, partnering for some of what we would consider key stream crossings in the name of connectivity? You know, I think of Meadowlark Drive as the poster child for that. The only way you get in or off is Country Club and Robin Hood. There's no east-west connectivity. And a couple of connections across Muddy Creek would have really made life a lot better along Meadowlark. Those are the kind of things that I think from a big picture standpoint, you know, we should be thinking about with respect to the improvements on Martha and the streets that this ties into. there's limited ability we have as a city to go too far off site and start asking the developer to go in and upgrade the road network all the way out. There's things we can do along the frontage that are clearly a rational nexus to what's going on. But to start going too far off site, we begin to start getting in some legal questions there as we go in and asking for off-site improvements off the site. So I do think one of the things as I'm kind of looking at the road network, my guess, and this is just my hypothesis, is I would suspect a lot of the folks that are going to live in the apartments that are proposed on this site would use the new drive that's associated with this and go directly out to Mizpah and then go right or left, rather than winding around an 18-foot wide, probably ribbon paved road through the neighborhood. That's my guess. And again, I that's just purely a guess, not based on any data. But those are just some of the issues that we've kind of got tangled up in this one.
Well, I think most of the traffic's going to go to Mizpah, head right to the traffic circle, get right on the bypass or whatever to go into work. And that makes a lot of sense. And Mizpah probably has plenty of capacity in that. I just want to be sure I get it on record, because I think we ought to give a heads up to city road plan that when we do connect someplace like this, that the city needs to step in and put that on a higher priority to be sure that that road is then usable by what we're saying is we approve of this development plan. Thank you.
Well, can I just piggyback on what Mr. Bryan said? I agree with what he said, and I also drove the area, and the Martha and also Vestal appear to me to be just minimal in terms of their standards. And I had a genuine concern about safety if there's a lot of traffic going through there, especially for people who may want to walk. If they want to walk their dogs, there's nowhere to go. There's no sidewalk or anything. And as George said, the yards go right up to the road. But my concern is really, as this builds out, we're just talking about 60 units here, but when this builds out, the multifamily, I don't know how many units are ultimately planned, but it's going to be considerably more than that. And then there'll be a connection to Vestal. Now, Vestal is going to be backing up to the Beltway on one side. And then on the other side, there'll be the traffic coming from this development. That's an awful lot of burden to put on a neighborhood, especially a neighborhood that was designed for a minimal street of this kind. So in terms of the topography and the way the houses are laid out, it's not designed for lots of cars barreling through. So I'm very concerned about the impact, especially as this builds out, that it's going to put on those neighbors on Vestal, not just the Martha connection that we're talking about here. And I don't see any solution. That's why I asked the question about a connection to the west. I really feel like that would relieve a lot of the burden of the traffic, and I would hope that maybe there's some way to do that, because otherwise, as this builds out, it's going to be problematic in my view.
Thank you both. We do have a motion and a second on the floor. Mr. King, will you please call the roll?
George Bryan?
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan?
Yes.
Jason Grubbs?
Yes.
Tommy Hicks?
Yes.
Clarence Lamb?
Yes.
Chris Lee?
Yes.
Brenda Smith?
Yes.
Jack Steelman? I think you're muted, Jack.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, that's 8-0.
All right, the next item, or the last item on the consent agenda, is C1, which is a subdivision 2020-088. It's called Mesa subdivision. It's for 80 single-family lots on 45.06 acres on the west side of Willard Road, and then southeast of White Meadow Lane and Downway Lane intersection. Here is the proposed site plan. It shows an extension of Downway Lane all the way through to Willard Road with another internal loop street, Round Table Drive. They have their common area with a mail kiosk and activity areas to the south of the site plan. They also are showing a proposed 40-foot greenway easement along, I believe this is Fiddler's Creek, and an eventual access from this common open space to the greenway that's proposed along Fiddler's Creek. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has at this time.
Are there any questions? All right.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb.
Second, Jason Grubbs.
Thank you, Mr. Grubbs. Second by Mr. Grubbs. Mr. King, will you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Tommy Hicks,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
All right, it's 8-0. And I believe that brings us, that finishes up sections B and C of your agenda and brings us to staff report. And before Mr. Corley gets cooled off, we'll ask him to give a preview of the October caseload for the board.
All right, for October, we have 3 planning board review items, 1 site plan amendment, 1 special use zoning request, 1 limited use zoning request, and 3 text amendments. So we have lots of public hearing items in October.
Thank you, Desmond. I'll just mention to you, I believe you probably received by email. If you haven't, we can certainly send it to you, our development dashboard that we publish, and we have traditionally done those on a quarterly basis. This year, because of COVID, we did that, and the one we did it for a couple reasons. One is we were working through a new design to try to put more useful information into that document. And so I'll just share my screen quickly. So this is kind of the new design that we've come up with. The previous one, if you remember, had kind of the dashboard speedometer at the top and then some verbiage. This one, we've tried to incorporate some statistics that we thought would be useful and interesting to know. We've got residential or non-residential permits up here at the top, new and broken down by new and redevelopment. Residential permits over here, kind of the yellow and orange. And what's interesting there, if you can see that, is it confirms what those of us who have been in the office throughout COVID have seen, is that it's been super busy. And you can see that the first 6 months of 2020 were busier than any 6 months in the past 5 years. So we have been rolling on the residential side. The non-residential side has kind of slipped off a little bit, but the residential side has been very strong. Non-residential square footage, we included information there. Number of units broken down by single family and multifamily, and then by land use. See, this was one that was kind of new to the dashboard. And then what's on the back kind of stays the same. 10 highest value developments in the past 6 months. We list those, and then we give you the overall county-wide map showing you kind of a breakdown of where these projects are going. So this is our first go round with this layout and with this information. So we would certainly welcome any feedback on information there. We're trying to be wise. The real estate we have on that 8.5 by 11 to really include information that's helpful to folks. So, you know, if you have time to look over that and digest it, if there's information you say, hey, Aaron, it sure would be great if we knew this, or hey, well, what about this? We'd certainly welcome any feedback there, because we're trying to make that as rich of a document as we can. So,
Aaron, this is Clarence. Have you got one thing I would love to see, and I thought it was a nice layout, information's easy to read and stuff like that. I think it'd be interesting to see what portion of the commercial dollars, you know, the spend ends up being non-revenue producing. I know sometimes we'll have institutional and stuff will be some payments in lieu instead of taxes, but I think that would be beneficial for elected body to see, so they can see if half of our construction for commercial is non-tax revenue stuff. It's something to be aware of.
Yeah, so Clarence, you're spot on, and you actually asked for the very thing that I kind of suggested and kind of asked for, and you're 100% right. Our elected officials pay a lot of attention to that top 10 list on the back, and in most, if you've paid attention to that in most quarters before, what you will see historically is probably at least 50% of those top 10s are institutional uses. Those projects are big dollar values, which is great for the work that it generates and the ripple effects from the construction. But it's a challenge on the back end because there's no tax base that comes with that. So the problem that I think we've run into is when we publish that publication, we don't know 100% who's paying taxes and who's not. And so there's kind of a lag in there. And so that's something that we may think about doing a separate publication on that maybe is a yearly recap or somewhere meshes some permitting data with some tax data to see how that's looking. But you are 100% spot on. That is one of the most critical issues that we've got going on. Especially with some of our large employers like Wake Forest Baptist, Novant. A lot of those folks, they're nonprofits, and those are big ticket permit values. But then we don't get the tax base on the backside of it. So that's definitely something we want to keep on our radar. If we can find a good way to track that, I'd certainly love to show that.
I'd like to add that it's great data to add, though I would in no way discourage the continued growth of those institutions in Winston-Salem.
Of course not. They add to the tax base through their employees.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Thank you.
But yes, like I say, if you have any time to digest that and have any comments, certainly reach out. We would like to have those. We want to continue refining the document. I just have two other items of note. This afternoon at the county commissioners meeting, they confirmed Mo McCray as the Johnny Seeger's unexpired term on the planning board. So I will reach out to Mo tomorrow, or Monique. I'll reach out to her tomorrow, and we'll start working to get an orientation scheduled. And she should be sworn in and seated and ready to participate in your September work session. So you'll have a new colleague coming on board at your work session. The only other thing I would mention to you is it was a busy night at City Council on Tuesday, and the Smith Reynolds Whitaker Park plan was adopted by City Council. So we have a new plan in place, and there was a lot of work and time and involvement with the community that went into that plan. So it was nice to see that one adopted. And that's all I have for staff report, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. And I want to thank you and your staff, because I remember when we first went to this new format, everyone was nervous, and it's going really well. We have 100% attendance every meeting from the board, which is very good. So thank you so much.
And I would also pass along to you, Mr. Chairman, what we have seen on the planning board is not an isolated occurrence. City boards, we have 40 some odd of them. Virtually all of them have been participating remotely, and attendance on pretty much all of those boards has gone up through COVID as a result of some of these remote meetings. So attendance, this volunteer attendance has really gone up. That's been one of the upsides of this.
Sounds like we led the way. Thank you. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
I'd just like to say go Deeks.
And without a motion to adjourn, please.
Second. All right, everybody have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.